When billionaire Spencer Langford stepped out of his sleek black Bentley that rain-soaked evening, he thought he was just picking up pastries for a high-profile charity gala. What he didn't expect was the shivering boy by the counter, or the quiet moment that would begin to unravel everything he thought success had given him. It wasn't just raining. It was the kind of storm that felt like the sky had cracked open to release something it could no longer hold. Inside Adler's bakery, golden light pooled against the windows, wrapping the fresh loaves in a kind of halo. At the counter stood a boy, soaked to the bone, his hands clasped not in demand, but in something closer to a prayer. His voice was barely louder than the hum of the heater. "Do you have any expired bread?" The clerk hesitated. A couple in line looked away, and most didn't notice him at all, except for one man. Spencer Langford, billionaire philanthropist, man of vision and concrete empires, watched from behind his pressed suit and curated distance. He had come for pastries. He didn't expect to feel anything, but something in the boy's voice, not just hunger, but ache, stirred a part of him he hadn't touched in years. What happened next would ripple far beyond that bakery door, and neither of them would walk away the same. Before we continue, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your engagement helps this story reach more hearts. Now let's dive right back into the story. The city glittered below Spencer Langford's penthouse, like a million tiny lies pretending to be stars. From the 38th floor, everything looked perfect. The skyline he'd helped shape stood proud in steel and glass, monuments to years of sacrifice, strategy, and silence. Inside, his home echoed with a kind of luxury that felt sterile. Designer furniture, untouched bookshelves, chilled wine, and a grand piano he hadn't played in years. The kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt punishing. He loosened his tie and tossed it onto the marble counter, pausing in the kitchen to pour himself a scotch. The glass trembled slightly in his hand. Not from age, from something else. "Do you have any expired bread?" The words came out of nowhere, Jamal's voice, barely above a whisper, laced with desperation and something more dangerous, innocence. Spencer rubbed his forehead. "It's nothing," he muttered to himself. "Just a moment." But it wasn't just a moment. He sat down on the edge of his leather sofa and stared at the floor like it had answers. His mind drifted where it often did when the silence got too loud, to his mother's funeral, the one he barely attended because of a meeting in Singapore, the same meeting that secured him a $400 million deal. He could still hear her voice some nights, warm, worn from prayers and lullabies. She used to call him my little promise. But promises get broken. His father never said much after she died, just poured himself into work and expected Spencer to do the same. Feelings were for the weak. Wins were for the strong. Love, that was optional. So Spencer built, not just buildings, but walls. He learned to rise early, think ruthlessly, and never cry. He learned to be admired, but never known. Tonight, though, admiration meant nothing. The scotch burned down his throat as the boy's voice echoed again. "Do you have any expired bread?" Why did it bother him so much? He'd seen 100 beggars in his lifetime, drove past them, gave to charities, kept receipts for the tax write-off. But this boy, that moment, felt different. Maybe it was how small Jamal looked next to those glowing shelves of bread, or how he asked with prayerful hands instead of demanding ones. Maybe it was because, for the first time in years, someone reminded Spencer that hunger wasn't always about food. He walked over to the window and looked down at the city. So many people, so many lights, but he felt alone. He thought of Psalm 68 verse 6, "God sets the lonely in families." Was that still true for someone like him? He pressed his forehead against the glass. For all his success, all his towers and triumphs, he had no one to call, no one waiting for him, not even a soul to ask if he was okay, except maybe a trembling boy in a bakery. He turned from the window. Tomorrow he would go back. The bell above Adler's bakery jingled as Spencer stepped inside, the smell of cinnamon and warm bread wrapping around him like a memory. He scanned the shop. No gray shirt, no trembling hands, no Jamal. The same attendant from the night before gave him a polite smile. "Back so soon, sir?" "That boy," Spencer said. "The one who was here last night. Do you know where he went?" The man hesitated, glancing toward the door. "Haven't seen him since." "Sorry." Spencer tried a few other shops on the block. A florist, a corner store, a tired-looking street sweeper dragging his broom along the sidewalk. "Oh, yeah, I saw that kid," the sweeper said, not even looking up. "He's around here sometimes. Quiet, keeps to himself. Shame, really. But where does he go?" Spencer pressed. The man shrugged. "They disappear, like ghosts." That word hit him in the chest. Ghosts. Was that what Jamal was to the world? Just another invisible soul slipping through cracks no one wanted to fix? The rain had dried up, but the wind still carried a bite. Spencer pulled his coat tighter as he searched alleyways and bus stops. Every few blocks, he stopped, asked, waited. No one knew. No one cared. His shoes were soaked by the time he spotted it. Just a glimpse, a small figure curled beneath the highway overpass. The boy's frame barely filled the corner of a graffiti-covered concrete slab. Spencer stepped closer. It was Jamal. He was asleep, his arms wrapped tightly around the crumpled bag of bread Spencer had bought. The loaf was barely touched. His clothes clung to his thin frame, still wet from the storm. A single worn shoe dangled off his foot. And his face looked too young to know that kind of fear. Spencer crouched down slowly, careful not to startle him. For a moment, he didn't move, just watched the rise and fall of Jamal's chest, as if making sure he was still breathing. Then, softly, "Jamal." The boy jolted upright, eyes wide with panic. He backed away, breath quickening. The bread clutched like it might vanish. "I didn't steal it." Jamal blurted, "I swear I didn't steal it." "You didn't do anything wrong," Spencer said, his voice low, steady. I just can't leave you out here." There was a long silence, the sound of passing cars overhead, a dog barking in the distance, the wind brushing through broken branches and wet cardboard. Jamal's eyes searched Spencer's face for a trick, for some angle he didn't understand. His shoulders didn't relax. Not yet, but he stopped pulling away. Spencer felt something shift in his own heart, something quiet, like a door opening for the first time in years. He didn't have a plan. He didn't even know what he was doing. But he knew this. God didn't open his eyes just so he could walk away again. Jamal sat stiffly in the back seat of Spencer's car, clutching the bag of bread like it was the only thing keeping him from floating away. As they pulled into the underground garage, Spencer glanced over. "You doing okay?" Jamal nodded, but his eyes stayed locked on the sleek leather interior, like it might vanish if he blinked. The elevator ride up was silent. When the doors opened to Spencer's penthouse, Jamal stepped out slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling glass windows. The city stretched below them, like a dream too far away to touch. Jamal whispered, "It's too big. I don't belong here." Spencer didn't know what to say. No one had ever walked into this place and shrunk in its presence. Most people marveled, complimented, envied. But Jamal, he looked like he was standing in the middle of a museum where everything was breakable, including him. "You belong here tonight," Spencer said gently. "That's enough." Jamal didn't answer. He just stared at the lights outside, as if trying to measure how far this place was from everything he knew. Dinner was quiet. Spencer reheated some pasta from earlier in the week. Jamal ate slowly at first, then faster, like his body remembered it was hungry. When he finished, he didn't ask for seconds. He packed the rest of the garlic bread and 2 meatballs into a napkin and slipped it into his jacket. For later, he muttered. Spencer pretended not to notice, but his heart ached. This wasn't just hunger. It was habit. Muscle memory from too many nights without. Spencer offered him the guest room, but Jamal asked to sleep on the couch. Said he liked being near the windows. He showered for a long time. When he came out, the oversized shirt Spencer lent him looked like it belonged to a scarecrow. But Jamal's eyes looked clearer. Still cautious. Still quiet. But clearer. Later that night, Spencer sat in the armchair across from the couch. A blanket draped around Jamal. Steam rising from 2 mugs of tea. "Where's your family?" Spencer asked softly. Jamal didn't look up. "My mom died last year. Real sudden. She used to work at a diner. Late shifts. But she prayed with me every night." Spencer nodded, silent. "I got sent to a shelter. But it wasn't good. Fights. Some of the older kids, His voice trailed off. "I left." Spencer swallowed hard. "How long have you been on your own?" "Since summer." A shrug. "You get used to it." Spencer didn't have words. Just a heaviness in his chest he couldn't explain. He looked at the boy curled into his couch, clinging to survival with both hands. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir that had nothing to do with wealth, ambition, or image. It felt like calling. Jamal yawned, eyes fluttering shut. Spencer turned off the lamp. No more words. But in the quiet, something passed between them. Something unspoken but real. Maybe it was trust. Maybe it was the beginning of healing. Spencer stood at the kitchen island, phone pressed to his ear, fingers drumming against cold marble. The sun had barely risen, casting a golden haze over the skyline. Jamal was still asleep on the couch, curled beneath the blanket like he didn't quite trust the morning to stay. "Yes, I need a background check on a shelter, Brookstone Youth Housing," Spencer said into the phone. "And everything you can find on its staff, incidents, complaints. I want the real file, not what they send to donors." He hung up and called his attorney next, then a child welfare advocate, then someone he knew from city council, the one who still had a conscience. One by one, truths began to surface, and they weren't just cracks in the system. They were fractures, deliberate ones, papered over with bureaucracy and budget cuts. Brookstone had been investigated 3 times in 6 years, all closed quietly, all the children's stories lost in red tape. Later that morning, over scrambled eggs and toast, Jamal spoke without being asked. "There's this man, Mr. Kellier," he said, voice low. "He locks kids in the storage room when they don't listen. No lights, no food, just rats." Spencer put down his fork. "And the night staff, sometimes they hit us. Sometimes worse." Jamal didn't cry. He said it like he was reading a menu, flat, factual, like emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford. Spencer gripped his coffee mug to keep his hands from shaking. This was his city, his empire, towers with his name on them, streets he helped pave, laws he lobbied for, and under his nose, children were being buried in silence. Jamal looked up. "Will they send me back?" Spencer met his eyes. "No," he said, "not on my watch." He meant it, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. Custody laws, foster care loopholes, state regulations. The system didn't care how many billions sat in your bank account. But God did, and that had to be enough for now. By noon, the phone calls shifted. His assistant left voicemails. Board members sent urgent emails. The press had noticed Spencer Langford missing 3 meetings in a row, unprecedented. Is Langford backing out of the East Bay project? Where's the king of Midtown? Billionaire vanishes, scandal or sabbatical? Spencer closed the laptop. Let them speculate. There was a boy sleeping in his living room who'd been left for dead by a system built to protect him. And the man who helped build that system now had a choice. Protect his image, or protect the boy. He stood by the window as city lights blinked on, one by one, across the skyline. So many buildings he'd helped create. So many foundations poured without ever asking what foundation he stood on. A verse stirred in his mind, one his mother used to whisper when bills were overdue. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Proverbs 31 verse 8. His empire had made him powerful, but maybe this was the first time it might make him righteous. The gates of Brookstone Youth housing creaked as they opened, slow, reluctant, like the building itself didn't want company. Spencer stepped out of the black SUV in a navy suit that looked more like armor than clothing. Beside him stood 2 investigators and a child welfare attorney. Behind them, a silent Jamal sat inside the vehicle, watching through the glass with wide, guarded eyes. A middle-aged woman approached, clipboard clutched tight. Mr. Langford, we weren't expecting a visit. I'm not here for tea, Spencer said. We have questions. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and something sour underneath, like it had secrets. The director, Mr. Kellier, met them in a cold conference room, his handshake firm, but his eyes too still. I assure you, he said smoothly, this facility meets every legal requirement. Spencer didn't sit. Legal isn't the same as ethical. The investigators began their inquiries. Spencer's lawyer laid out the complaints: excessive discipline, lack of supervision, emotional and physical abuse. Documents appeared. So did excuses. We serve hundreds of at-risk youth, Kellier insisted. Some kids just don't want rules. Spencer leaned forward. One of those kids has a name, Jamal Fisher, and he remembers everything. Outside, Jamal waited, fingers tracing the ridges of the bread crust he still carried in his coat pocket. The SUV felt too quiet, too safe. His mind drifted to that locked storage room. No light, no one coming, just his own breath and the sound of rats. To the night someone pulled his blanket away while he pretended to sleep. To praying without words, because he'd forgotten how to believe they'd be heard. He hadn't told Spencer everything. Maybe he couldn't. Not yet. But he remembered enough. When the meeting ended, Kellier's voice turned sharp. You have no custody. Harboring a minor outside the system is illegal. We could press charges. Child abduction. Spencer stared him down. Try me. His attorney's eyes widened, but Spencer didn't flinch. I'm launching a formal probe, he continued. I'll go public if I have to. This ends now. Kellier smirked. You'll lose everything. Spencer paused. The old version of him would have backed down, weighed the cost, considered headlines, stock value, image, but not now. Not with Jamal's life in the balance. Back in the car, Spencer opened the door. Jamal looked up, unsure. We're not done, Spencer said quietly. But you don't have to go back there. Not ever. Jamal exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for months. As they pulled away, the building faded behind them, still standing, still dangerous. But now, the shadows weren't untouchable. That night, Spencer stood at his window again. Same view, different man. He thought of the towers he'd built, the empire he'd carved out of cold steel and sharp deals. If it all falls because I protected a child, he whispered, then it was never worth having. And for the first time in years, he meant every word. The first time Jamal slept through the night, Spencer sat in the hallway outside the guest room, staring at the closed door like it was sacred. No tossing, no gasping, no waking up in a sweat. Just quiet, just peace. It felt like a miracle wrapped in stillness. The days that followed moved slowly, like spring after a long winter. Spencer enrolled Jamal for academic assessments with a local private school, one willing to work with trauma-affected children. His reading was strong, but math made his hands shake. Still, he tried. That alone was a victory. Therapy sessions began twice a week. At first, Jamal barely spoke. He kept his eyes on the carpet. But one afternoon, the therapist asked if he liked music. Jamal nodded. That was the crack. From there came stories about his mom's humming in the kitchen, about nights he counted stars to stay calm, and eventually about the shelter. "I thought it was my fault," he whispered once, tears sliding down his face. "That maybe God was mad at me." Spencer sat with him afterward on the couch, silent. Then he said something he'd never told another soul. "My father used to say crying made you weak. The night my mom died, I didn't even cry at the funeral." Jamal looked up, surprised. Spencer gave a sad smile. "Turns out, not crying doesn't save you. It just builds walls so high, no one can reach you." They sat in that quiet for a long time, both of them knowing the walls were coming down. Their rhythm began to shift. Mornings with eggs and laughter, evenings with homework and TV. Spencer had never been anyone's father, but somehow, everything in his heart started moving in that direction. He bought Jamal a hoodie that actually fit, taught him how to make pancakes. They fought over how spicy chili should be. It was messy, beautiful, and underneath it all, Spencer prayed more than he ever had, not just for protection, but for healing, for redemption, for the kind of family neither of them had ever known. Then the news broke. Brookstone shelter exposed. Donors withdraw as abuse allegations mount. Spencer's name was everywhere, hailed by some, hated by others. A board member called him furious. "You've made enemies. You're dragging your name through the mud. All for some street kid?" Spencer hung up without answering, but Jamal had heard. He stood just outside the room, the words echoing inside him like thunder. All for some street kid. That night, Spencer found his dinner untouched. By morning, Jamal was gone. His bed was made. His hoodie was missing. The zipper on his backpack had been carefully pulled shut. On the kitchen counter sat a note, written in shaky pencil. "Thank you. I don't want to ruin your life." Spencer stood there, heart pounding, paper trembling in his hands. He had built towers that touched the sky, but none of them mattered now. Not if he couldn't find his boy. The apartment was too quiet. Spencer's eyes shot open. The hallway light was off. He always left it on for Jamal. He swung his legs over the bed and called out softly, "Jamal!" No answer. The guest room was empty. The blanket folded. The backpack gone. His stomach dropped. Not again. Not this time. 15 minutes later, Spencer's car tore through the sleeping city. He drove with one hand, calling Jamal's phone with the other, straight to voicemail. He checked every corner of their routine: the bus stop, the library, the bench outside the community center. Nothing. His heart pounded louder with each turn. The city lights blurred through the windshield like tears refusing to fall. And then he saw it. The bakery. Adler's. The same one from that first night where it all began. Jamal sat on the curb, hoodie pulled tight around him, eyes red and hollow. The same window glowed behind him, full of bread and warmth and everything he thought he couldn't have. Spencer parked crooked and rushed over. He didn't speak right away, just knelt in front of the boy who had somehow become his whole world. "I'm sorry." Jamal whispered, voice cracking. "I heard what they said. About me ruining your life. And I didn't want to be that. Not again." Spencer felt his throat tighten. He reached out slowly, gently, like approaching something sacred. "You didn't ruin my life," he said. "You saved it." Jamal looked up, confused. Spencer's voice broke as he continued. "You gave me something no money, no building, no deal ever gave me. You gave me a reason to care again, to feel, to love." He paused. "I don't want the world without you in it." For a second, neither of them moved. Then Jamal leaned forward and wrapped his arms around Spencer's neck, clinging like a kid who finally believed someone would hold him back. Spencer held on just as tightly. They sat on the curb until dawn painted soft gold across the concrete. Then, with Jamal resting quietly in the passenger seat, Spencer made one more call. "Garcia, it's Langford. I need the paperwork drawn up. I want full guardianship of Jamal Fisher, whatever it takes." A pause. The lawyer's voice filtered through the speaker. "Are you sure?" Spencer looked over at Jamal, now asleep, his face finally at peace. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." That morning, back in the apartment, Jamal dropped his bag by the door. Spencer handed him a key. Jamal stared at it, silent. "For me? For you," Spencer said. "This is your home now." There was no grand reaction, no tears, just a small, broken boy finally daring to believe what he'd always dreamed might be true. He turned the key over in his hand, held it like a promise. 1 year later, the building on East 7th Street looked nothing like the place it used to be. Gone were the rusted locks and broken windows. Gone was the cold, gray silence. In their place stood the Haven, a community home buzzing with life. Kids playing basketball out front, laughter echoing in the hallways, and volunteers stacking boxes of food in the kitchen. At the heart of it all was Spencer Langford, dressed in jeans and a plain button-up, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled up, and across the entrance, carved into smooth stone, were the words, "Jamal's table. There's always enough to share." The foundation had started small, just one meal program in a church basement. Now it fed over 200 kids a week, offering tutoring, mentorship, and shelter. Adler's Bakery, once a quiet bystander to pain, now delivered fresh bread every morning, their windows carrying the scent of cinnamon and something holier. Spencer had lost a few board members, lost some business contracts, but he had gained something no deal had ever given him, a legacy that mattered. That afternoon, Spencer and Jamal stood inside the bakery that changed everything. Jamal had grown taller, shoulders straighter, eyes brighter. He wore the same color hoodie this time, not torn, not soaked in rain, but clean and worn like home. Spencer watched as Jamal reached into a basket of warm loaves and walked outside. On the curb sat a boy, small, shivering, his hands tucked into threadbare sleeves. Without hesitation, Jamal knelt beside him. "Hey," he said gently, handing the boy a roll. "It's still warm." The child looked up, hesitant. Jamal smiled. "There's always enough to share." The boy took the bread, eyes wide. A soft thank you slipped through cracked lips. Spencer felt his throat tighten. It was full circle, and it was holy. That night, as the city lights flickered on, Spencer sat at the dining table across from Jamal, now officially his son in every way but blood. They prayed over dinner like they always did, and as they said amen, Spencer looked at him. This boy who had asked for expired bread and given him something priceless in return. He thought about how it all started. A rainy night, a trembling whisper, a world too busy to notice, and one quiet moment when God reached through the storm, not with thunder, but with a question too small for most to hear. "Do you have any expired bread?" Spencer smiled to himself. Sometimes the smallest voice is what God uses to revive a man's heart and rewrite the destiny of a child.
If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as the Bible reminds us, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for God. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still changes lives.